to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Ronnie Dahl. In the studios, the Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. In addition, today, as always, we're on 88.1 WBFH, The Biff, and Birmingham Area Municipal Access. Today, in addition to our TV and radio outlets, we are, of course, on the internet via Facebook Live. Today, our Facebook partner is the Orchard Mall. We thank them, Kelly Woodley, and their entire team at the Orchard Mall for joining us today on the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Ronnie Dahl. You can watch and listen to us live from 10 a.m. to 12 noon, Monday through Friday, here on Civic Center TV and on Lakes FM for replays during our live shows, and as well as replays after our show throughout the afternoon and over the weekends. In addition to our family of other TV and radio stations, we're here bringing you the latest news and information about the coronavirus and other top stories in the local area each and every day here on our family of community television, radio, and other media outlets, including on our website on civiccentertv.com, where you can watch live today, and you can also find our top headlines and information on civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. And today, our top story: Michigan orders coronavirus testing of agricultural workers. Michigan health officials issued a new emergency order requiring coronavirus testing for agricultural and food processing workers following at least 11 outbreaks at farms and food processing plants. The Health and Human Services Department said it has identified 11 coronavirus outbreaks at farms and food processing plants recently. Under the new order, employers must provide a one-time baseline testing of all workers, test new workers prior to any in-person work, and test any workers with symptoms or those who have been exposed to COVID-19. A testing plan must be submitted by employers and housing operators by August 10th. The baseline testing must be complete, followed by ongoing testing by August 24th. So we're seeing now in the food industry, where previously had been pretty much clear from, at least from what we had heard, from the coronavirus, from the impact of the pandemic directly to the workers. Now they're starting to see those mini outbreaks, the state requiring that these critical workers in this absolutely essential service maintain safety from COVID-19 as the virus continues to spread in its own mysterious ways.
I'm really surprised this didn't come down sooner, because we saw the huge outbreaks happening at the meat processing plants earlier in the epidemic or pandemic. So for this to take so long, they must be really seeing some of these spikes in the migrant worker camping and the housing. So it'll be interesting to see, though, how long it takes for them to get this up and implemented. It's really not a long time. August 10th, you need to have your plan together and then up and running by the 24th.
Yeah, 6 days to get your plan set and sent into the state, and then the baseline testing begins regularly in 20 days. Other top stories at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. Henry Ford Health System is defending a study that determined that hydroxychloroquine was effective in lowering COVID-19 death rates, but acknowledged the need for additional clinical trials. The statement comes 3 days after the nation's top infectious disease expert called the July 2nd study results, quote, flawed. The Detroit-based health system agreed that the best study of the drug was, as argued by Dr. Anthony Fauci on Friday, was a double-blind, randomized clinical trial. Hospital officers emphasized the importance of scientific debate in advancing knowledge of drugs, but noted the politicization of hydroxychloroquine is a large obstacle to the process. So the study from Henry Ford Health System had shown that, or had led experts to believe that hydroxychloroquine in some cases was effective in lowering the death rate for patients of COVID-19. Others have denied that that's the case, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, who called that study flawed. And the debate continues on, as it seems, and we mentioned politicization of therapeutic medicines for COVID-19. One side really seems to believe that hydroxychloroquine is highly effective, and the other side believes that it's highly ineffective, or that the jury is still out on the information. Regardless, it's always good news to see some effective way of treating COVID-19, whether that be hydroxychloroquine, whether that be convalescent plasma, or other methods.
If I'm sick, if this works for me, this works for me. We need to start taking the politics out of trying to find a solution and a vaccine to this drug, because at the end of the day, it's about saving lives.
A couple more stories at civiccentertv.com/coronavirus about our local colleges and universities. The University of Michigan says students must social distance prior to returning to campus. The University of Michigan students planning to return for the fall must commit themselves to 14 days of quote-unquote enhanced social distancing at home before returning to the Ann Arbor campus to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. Those living in residence halls and apartments will also have to take and pass a COVID-19 test. The quarantine guidelines released on Monday apply to all students and include things such as not going to work or social gatherings and taking their temperature twice a day and monitoring for fever. Fall classes at the University of Michigan begin on August 31st. That means students will have to stop working if they have jobs no later than August 17th to comply with the enhanced social distancing guidelines. Tough from my vantage point for me to believe that this is going to be enforceable for the University of Michigan, and that it's entirely plausible for students who are trying to maximize, especially in the work situation, how long they are able to bring in an income over the summer before, of course, the work situation is going to change when they go back to school. And in this case, Michigan also raised the tuition almost 2% this year despite the pandemic. So that makes that even more questionable, especially when workplaces are required to provide safe environments for COVID-19, and people are able to take time away if they believe the situation is not safe. I get the sentiment of it, and I believe that taking strict, stringent action against COVID-19 is prudent, but I don't entirely see this being a realistic option.
I don't think it's enforceable. I think this is the way for the college to cover itself in case there is an outbreak, because then they can say these are the recommendation guidelines that we put out requesting that students do this prior to returning to campus. They know, we know, most students are not going to do this, and some simply are not going to be able to do this due to the economics.
It's a tough situation. It's an interesting situation. I don't think we've heard the end of this story just yet. I would think that maybe there could be more changes coming to these requirements. And students, of course, to reiterate, have to commit to 14 days of, as the University of Michigan calls it, enhanced social distancing, which includes not going to work and other social gatherings. Lastly, Michigan State University tells students to stay home this fall. Less than a month before classes are set to begin at MSU, President Sam Stanley is encouraging students to stay home for the fall semester if they can, as COVID-19 cases continue to spread. A quote from President Stanley: "If you can live safely and study successfully at home, we encourage you to consider that option for the fall semester," and closed quote, Stanley wrote in an email to students on Monday. Continuing the quote, "The vast majority of first-year students this fall will have course schedules that are completely online. Living away from campus may be the best choice for you and your family, particularly if you have family members who are at higher risk," and closed quote. MSU undergraduate classes resume on September 2nd, though some graduate classes, such as those in the law school, begin as soon as August 17th. So a different story at Michigan State, where similar to the University of Michigan, they will have some classes that are going to be on campus and are going to be including in-person options. However, rather than putting restrictions in place that say if you don't maintain a quarantine for 14 days, stay out of work, stay out of social gatherings, on top of all the regular day-to-day precautions that you're taking, that you can't come into class, their approach is different, where they're saying, we don't believe it's entirely safe or best practice to have you back on campus and in these classes. You're free to do so if the need presents itself. We do have safety measures in place, but we believe that the best possible option for your safety, for the public safety, and for the continuity of education is to continue your education online until further notice.
So if I'm going or only taking classes online, if I'm an out-of-state student, would they waive that out-of-state fee? They're not. That's been a point of discussion prior to this, but The economics in this as well. Again, a lot of students had to secure their housing for this upcoming semester last year. So they're going to be locked into these leases and not able to get out of them. So they'll be paying for housing, yet still living at home.
Yeah, I believe that what we're going to see is probably something of a 50-50 sense at Michigan State, where half the people will stay home and another half will live in their apartments if they have signed a lease off of campus, and some may even still live in the dorms and continue their classes either online or in person, however they so choose, based on their situation. But it is interesting with these colleges and universities as they're approaching this fall, and some have taken the approach of, we're going to reduce tuitions or we're going to freeze tuition. Oakland University is a great example of that. And other colleges and universities have said, well, we're either going to keep our tuition rates the same, or in the case of the University of Michigan and other colleges as well, they're not alone in this, we're going to raise tuition despite the situation that we're in, knowing that we're in a little bit of financial trouble right now, and we're asking these kids to go into further financial trouble. We're going down a little bit of a slippery slope there. I would think the colleges and universities are, but it's going to continue to be interesting as time goes on, because here they released their plans, some of them a month ago, 2 months ago, and we're down to the wire. We're a few weeks out from the beginning, and their plans are still not completely in place.
Well, and that's the same thing that's happening with schools across the country, not just here in Michigan. We're seeing also here each school district has a different plan on how they're going to address the kids coming back. Some are doing the hybrid, some are doing remote learning, and we're seeing that play out on the college campuses as well. What's going to be interesting, though, is if we continue to see a spike, would they then close down the campus for these students and go complete remote?
That wouldn't surprise me either. I think that much like Oakland Community College, who we talked to, was fully prepared over the summer to go entirely virtual, and some other universities that are, like Michigan State in this situation, encouraging students to remain virtual as best as possible. I would hope in this situation, especially given what they went through in March at the onset of this pandemic in the state of Michigan, that they are prepared for that sudden pivot once again. Those stories and more, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. In addition, we have links to reputable resources about the coronavirus from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the state of Michigan, Oakland County, and many of our local municipalities in our coverage area. Find that information on civiccentertv.com/coronavirus, your home for trusted information on the coronavirus from news sources and reputable resources in government and public health. civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. As we continue on in this coronavirus pandemic, we're working towards solutions on vaccinations, therapeutics, and so on. But as we get closer to that, we have to bring up questions of, when is a vaccine ready? Where should it be distributed first? Who should be first in line? And how do we go about maintaining the safety of these medications and these vaccines as we're trying to also find a solution in a timely manner? To talk about that and more, we are joined first today by Associate Professor of Bioethics at Oakland University's William Beaumont School of Medicine. Dr. Jason Wasserman joins us once again on the Oakland County Megacast. Dr. Wasserman, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me back. It's good to be with you.
Appreciate having you on. How have you been since we last spoke?
Well, like everybody, cooped up in the house, but we're doing our best and trying to, as you mentioned, get ready for the fall semester, which is going to be unpredictable, and it's taking quite a bit of work to plan for the various contingencies. But I'm excited to welcome our medical students back, whether that's obviously going to be mostly virtually, but great to get a new crop and start to think about generating more doctors for the state of Michigan.
And it's interesting, too, because teaching students in many other degree programs is certainly different than teaching students in a medical program in regular times. In times like this, what new challenges does that present to people like you and other associate professors and professors in the William Beaumont School as they're trying to teach these budding medical professionals to be great medical professionals, hands-on medical professionals, while we're all at a social distance?
Yeah, so common misconception is that a lot of what we do is just pump their heads full of facts about the human body and pathophysiology. And I'd actually say that whilst that's a significant part of their learning, just as important is how they learn to work together, how they learn to be professional, so to be a physician and all of the sort of norms that entails and the way one sort of approaches one's craft. These are things that you learn by being present with other professionals, by working with your colleagues closely. It's what we call cognitive apprenticeship, that's sort of absorbing all of the, we used to call them soft skills, but I hate that term, but all of the sort of norms and patterns and habits of being a professional. And it's going to be quite challenging to replicate that. We're going to try to do a lot of virtual stuff like we're doing now. So you and I are interacting, albeit it's not quite as high quality as an actual interpersonal interaction. But we're going to do what we can, and we're going to hope that sooner rather than later we can it'll be a new normal, but we'll get people sort of back together and start to really ramp up all that teamwork, relationship building, and community building that we really pride ourselves on at OUWB.
Professor, do you think going through a pandemic, actually living through it, can enhance their education in a way that they wouldn't experience otherwise?
I do, yeah. And this is a question. I did some sessions for students from around the country and around the world, actually, for the Arnold P. Gold Foundation on humanism in medicine. And some of what we talked about, those students came from Ireland, and they were in Singapore and the United States and Canada. And to a student, they really felt like, wow, there was tremendous downside to the pandemic, particularly in terms of most of them had been pulled out of their clinicals by and large, and they weren't getting the kinds of experiences that they had hoped they would be having. They also spoke about this sort of new awareness that they had. They spoke about feeling deeply committed to the profession of medicine, of wanting to, of one of the things they realized when they were pulled out of clinicals was what they really wanted to do is be able to help, and they felt helpless, and that feeling has stuck with them. And many of them, they went out looking for opportunities to get involved. And what I hope is that in some way, not just the pandemic, but the new attention to police brutality and racial inequalities in health, all of these things is going to create a new generation that is particularly mindful of what's happening at a macro level with health, at a political level with health policy, and thinks very deliberately and critically about what their role is in shaping all of that.
Dr. Jason Wasserman with us. He's an associate professor of bioethics at the Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine. So as we're continuing forward, Dr. Wasserman, we've seen some issues in recent weeks regarding testing of COVID-19 in the state of Michigan. Some backlogs of cases as more testing comes into these independent labs that are usually a little bit slower than hospital labs or county or state labs necessarily are, and they had several backlogs, which led to a delay in results being relayed to the state of Michigan and then to the public. So as we're going forward, and we've brought this up to physicians we've spoken to, should there be a priority in who is getting tested and whose results are coming forward first? Should it be those that are at risk of infection or at a higher risk or have been exposed potentially to COVID-19 before someone that's casually going in an abundance of caution and saying, I'm getting tested just because I'm curious if I'm asymptomatic or not?
Yeah, I think that makes sense philosophically. Putting it into practice is a bit more challenging. Now, there's big cuts that you can make to prioritize people. So rapid testing for healthcare workers is obviously something that you can do relatively easily. You can identify who those people are and create better pipelines for them to get testing. I think we've done that by and large. And that's important because a negative test for a healthcare worker is one more person back on the front lines helping us in this pandemic. And so getting that information sooner is better. When it comes to trying to identify, who to test in terms of, well, I have a large family or I'm in a high density residential neighborhood. I think that that's a lot more challenging. And I think it makes sense to put our resources where they're going to do the most good. So I would want to test higher risk people, certainly, and some of that is identifiable and some of it's not. I want to test people who put others at higher risk to a greater degree. That's hard to determine. But I mean, I think philosophically that's fair. Practically, it's a little bit more difficult to carry out. There's some simple ways to do it, but I think we're probably going to be limited to those.
There is such a big debate across the country right now and here in the state of Michigan about whether or not kids should go back to school. It's one thing when we're talking about college students, but when you're, 8, 9, 10 years old, it's hard for them to socially distance. It's hard for them to keep a mask on. Should we be putting them back in the classroom, in your opinion?
Yeah, I have an 8-year-old, and so this is something my wife and I pay particular attention to. I think that one of the challenges is going to be that we probably do need some state and district-wide policies, but different schools are different age groups are different, and it's important to consider that. The question about whether we should or shouldn't, I think, is complex. I think it depends on the specific situation that they're returning to. My 8-year-old's school has a plan in place that I'm particularly comfortable with, which includes almost exclusively outdoor schooling, ventilated outdoor tents, mandatory mask wearing, and temperature checks for all the kids as they come in. The classes are small, and they've measured, and they think that they're going to be able to whatever extent you can, properly mitigate the risk. And we'll see how it goes. But, I think that they're doing everything right and doing what they can. But that school has advantages that not all schools have. And I would be concerned about a higher density school population. I'd be concerned, but I'll tell you this. One thing that I think we can all particularly invest in is following through on the kinds of protocols that are laid out in the state plan, that are being laid out by the CDC. And I think the biggest risk that we face is, especially the biggest modifiable risk we face, are people that are, resisting those basic, simple measures. I see on forums parents objecting to having their kids wear masks in schools, and that's going to be our downfall. I think that, the plans are what they can be, but it's up to us, all of us collectively, to execute those plans, to put aside the conspiracy theories about CO2 buildup in masks, which is absurd. These masks are not going to make your kids woozy. That's something I heard. If masks made people woozy, surgeons would have a really tough time doing their jobs, and they don't. So I think, the plans are going to be probably as good as they can. There's some circumstances at a number of schools that are going to be really challenging. But what we should focus on is all coming together and making sure that we execute those plans as safely and as thoroughly as we can.
I will say I haven't heard that theory about the mask yet, so that's a new one to me, and I thought I'd covered a lot of them. So do you think the kids need to be tested prior to going back to school? But then we're even seeing in situations like, professional sports where they're negative on Monday, Wednesday, but then positive on Friday. So it's a snapshot in time. Would that even be effective?
I don't know. I would leave that to an epidemiologist to tell us about the value of comprehensive testing. Certainly kids that have, some reason to believe they've been exposed or have family members that are at risk, it would make sense, I think, to test them. I think the temperature checks, are a good idea. A lot of what we're seeing come out of, from the data from summer camps that were open and the data from schools in other countries that opened as the virus subsided is not promising. So I'm not sure that, comprehensive testing is the right way to go, but certainly testing, strategic testing probably is a good idea.
Dr. Jason Wasserman with us. He is an associate professor of bioethics at the Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine. Dr. Wasserman, as we're getting further along in vaccine trials, many vaccines now are in phase 3 of their trials, and we're really rushing toward, and rushing's not the best word to be using necessarily, toward finalizing these vaccines, and hopefully sooner rather than later, having a vaccine that is effective and is safe and that can be then distributed to the public throughout the world. But as we're approaching that from a bioethical standpoint, how ethical is speed? To what extent is speed of these tests and getting a vaccine available still within the realm of being ethical, and where do we draw that line where, well, we could take a little bit longer, be a little more thorough, or we can get it done as soon as possible, know it's mostly safe, but get it out early for the good of the public health?
Yeah, I'm not sure we should be making that choice, because I think that what we should be doing is investing really heavily in quick and thorough development. So all of this is much of the tension between speed and efficacy and safety is really a resource question. And if we invest in properly in vaccine development, I think we can move forward more quickly. That doesn't, but you're correct that we should not be sacrificing safety and efficacy for speed, where we might have to make some choice about that. I think that's particularly important for a couple of reasons. One is from an ethics standpoint, from a public health ethics standpoint, there are other ways to mitigate the risk of coronavirus. And if we as a society were doing a better job following best practices, we would not be at, the effect and need of a vaccine would be far diminished. Two is that there's a long-term consequence of putting out a vaccine that's has limited efficacy, or especially that has any kinds of safety questions. If you pay attention to the vaccine debates, people who oppose vaccines, who are vaccine deniers or vaccine hesitant, commonly cite all sorts of statistics about side effects of vaccines. Most of these are false or exaggerated, or they come from self-reported databases, which means that people can go in and self-assess whether the vaccine caused them any problems. It's not reliable. But the last thing we want to do is fuel that with a new vaccine that has real challenges in that regard. I think it's I know that there's a short-term goal here of getting the coronavirus under control, but we got to pay attention to the long-term consequences of doing a vaccine the wrong way. And I'd rather see us do it the right way.
As a professor of bioethics, what have you learned from this pandemic, and what concerns do you have going forward?
Wow. It's a big question, because like everyone else, I think I'm learning quite a bit about how we function as a society, what our shortcomings are with respect to public health infrastructure, with respect to economic infrastructure. I think we've learned a number of things. We've learned to some extent we weren't as well prepared as we should have been. I think we learned that stricter measures early would have been a better way to confront the pandemic when it first began. These things are pandemics or infectious diseases are spread exponentially. So if you can cut it off early, it pays manyfold down the road. I think we learned that lesson, and unfortunately, we're still learning that lesson now, as we see, especially in the South and the West, rates of the virus, really dramatically higher than they really should be. I think we learned a lot about how the complexities of fairly distributing scarce resources. So as we started to try to plan for scarce resource distribution, running out of ventilators, for example, we started to confront inequality in health in our society in an even greater way. We realized that if we base, for example, who gets a ventilator on comorbidities that they have, that's unfair, because different populations are affected differently by health and illness in our society. African Americans, for example, are experiencing rates of coronavirus that are much higher, so inequality is paying itself forward even as we try to respond ethically to the pandemic. So I just, I think the lessons.
We apologize, Dr. Jason Wasserman. It looks like we've had some technical issues on our end. We'll have to cut your interview a little bit short. We appreciate having you on. Jason Wasserman, Associate Professor of Bioethics at the Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine. We're going to take a quick break and we'll return with more. You're watching and listening to the Oakland County Megacast on our family of TV and radio stations. Ronnie and I will return after this break.
This may seem uncomfortable, but so is being hooked to an IV, sleeping in a hospital bed, and fighting for your life. When it comes to COVID-19, comfort is not as important as saving lives. Wearing a mask can greatly reduce the chance of spreading the virus. So mask up, Michigan, every time you leave home.
As rivals, we don't always see eye to eye.
Like who scored the best recruits?
Who's gonna be who?
And whether we wear green
Or blue. But one thing we can all agree on to help stop the spread of COVID-19, wear a mask.
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 The ball's in your court, Michigan.
Welcome back to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Ronnie Dahl in the studios of 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 WBFH. The Biff also with us today alongside Birmingham Area Municipal Access. And we are on the Facebook page via Facebook Live with the Orchard Mall today. We thank you for joining us. We apologize previously at the end of Dr. Jason Wasserman's interview from Oakland University. We did have some technical difficulties that cut off the last few minutes of his interview. We apologize for that. We are back now, and it appears that we are going strong, and we appreciate you for sticking with us and having patience with us today. That happens in the TV and radio business, but we got to work through it, and we are back in full strength now and are pleased to be joined by our second guest today here on the Oakland County Megacast. He is from Bassquatch Hunter TV. Mike McKinstry joins us now on the Oakland County Megacast. Mike, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, of course, man.
Appreciate having you on. How are you, and how have you been over the course of the pandemic?
Well, that's a short question followed by a long question. I'm doing good, and it's been a long road. Well, I'll keep that one short for now. It's been a long road, as most people have. It's been a lot of adjusting, and it's been a lot of trying to research and trying to not research at the same time, like trying to stay out of my head with the whole thing, but also trying to make sure I'm up to date with all the newest stuff that's going on with everything so I can move forward with the show. And it's been tough.
Mike, this is Ronnie. I will say I hadn't heard of your show prior to seeing you booked as a guest, so I went on and watched some video. How did you even start this? It's fascinating.
It's the question I get the most, and it's probably my favorite question to answer because the whole like basis behind everything I do, everyone always just assumes I do fishing and that's all I do. My show is way more than fishing, and the main point of what I do is to try to inspire people and motivate people. And I just found a different vehicle to do it, which is the outdoors and fishing. So what started me to do this is I had a normal job like everybody else. I had a career in marketing. I did 13 years in the marketing industry, and I had a bunch of businesses on the side. I've owned a restaurant. I've had a lot of other stuff like in the middle of that. And I never really found something that really fulfilled everything I wanted to do. And most people have jobs in order to afford to pay for their hobbies. If your hobby is painting, then your job pays for you to be able to paint. Or if your hobby is cycling, then your job pays for you to be able to cycle. And I wanted to kind of do something different, and I wanted to do my hobby for a living instead. And I was like, you know what? That's what would really make me happy, is if instead of working just so I could do what I want to do, I want to do what I want to do all the time. And I remember the day this happened, actually. I was doing a lot of meetings from the water. I was in my kayak doing a lot of phone meetings, and I wasn't in my office that often. I was mostly on the water. And I had a customer call me, and I was in the middle of a really big meeting. And right in the middle of the meeting, I caught a really big fish. And he heard me get all excited. And I was like, oh, I caught a huge fish. He goes, really? He goes, you know what? Forget the meeting. Send me a picture of that fish. I love fishing. Send me a picture of the fish you just caught. So we ended up talking for another hour just about fishing. And that's when it kind of hit me. And I was like, you know what? I need to be doing this full time. And I went back to my office. I told my partners there, I was like, look, I've been here for 10 years, and my 10-year anniversary is in 2 weeks, and that's going to be my going away party. And no one was really that surprised. Everyone kind of saw it coming because they knew my passions were. And then I started a YouTube channel, and that's how I started everything. Is I just jumped into YouTube, and I didn't know what I was doing. I had a lot of history in filming, but I didn't really know what I was doing on YouTube. And it took off. My format was just so generic at first, and then it turned into something very unique and organic, and people related to it really well. And then I got picked up by a streaming service 2 years later, and then got a 2-year contract with a cable network for this year, next year, and it just keeps on growing from there. But I just wanted to follow happiness is what I wanted to do, and stop following the paycheck and stop following the proverbial American dream and just follow my own dream instead.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's such a good philosophy in life. How has this pandemic impacted you, though? Have you had to put the brakes on everything?
Oh, yeah, it slowed everything down. So a big part of my show that I do, like I mentioned earlier, is I want to try to inspire people a lot. So I do a lot of pay it forward segments in every episode. I do a lot of charity stuff. I surprise people with, free food, and we do we handed out over 200 meals on Christmas. We do all these really cool charity things. I try to give back all the time. So the pandemic slowed down all of that because I can't go to schools and do my seminars. I can't do, we had some things set up where we're surprising kids' classrooms with all free fishing rods for full classrooms, for summer camps, and all my seminars and expos, everything got canceled. So all the work we did to plan for filming for this season kind of went out the window pretty quickly in March. And then come June, we decided to start filming again, and it's just one person crew, and everything is really stripped down. We can't film inside buildings, so everything has been a little bit more scrambled. We still are getting the job done. We're still doing what we need to do, but we've been working with one person crews, or if we have a 2-person crew, then they have to stay distanced, and it's definitely changed a lot. A lot of my episodes I had planned got canceled, and we're going to be filming for next season hopefully. But yeah, it definitely changed a lot. The only good part about this whole pandemic being locked down is that I work outdoors, and it's also been easy to inspire people to go outdoors too, because if you're locked inside all day and you're not used to it, what better way to get outside than to go on the water and enjoy the nature, so it's kind of helped out in some ways, and it's just made us adjust a little bit differently.
Mike McKinstry with us from Bassquatch Hunter TV on the Oakland County Megacast. Mike, as the pandemic has gone on, a lot of shows have experienced production shutdowns, have not continued to bring out content, or have ended up going off the air or not releasing new content and then coming back several months later in a virtual sense. What's the status of Bassquatch Hunter TV? Is that production, has that been shut down? Is that continuing on because it's maybe a smaller production? How are you continuing to provide that content to your audience despite the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic?
So we've actually evolved and adapted, and that's what I do best. I work with water, so I try to be like water and just evolve and adapt. And I ended up taking a lot of the roles on myself. I still have my producers working. I have camera guys that are working just on their own. We're all working from remote places, obviously. I'm doing a lot of the editing myself so I can keep it in one room. And we're still filming. We're still putting new episodes out. And like I said, it's the beauty of being outside is I can go out by myself and have a camera guy in another boat. So we're 25, 30 feet away from each other at all times. And when we're done filming at the end of the day, I get all the footage emailed to me. So we're not even making contact. And then I go through it all and do a lot of the editing myself or send it to my editor via email. So a lot of it's just adjusted. Instead of us all sitting in a production office together, and having a big crew out at once, we're just doing everything a little stripped down, a little bit differently, and we're still pumping out new content and still having great adventures. I mean, luckily the fish don't wear masks, so they're still biting. So, it's still been able to happen for the most part. We've had to adjust a lot. We had a lot of episodes planned that I was really excited about to do this year that we had to put on hold because of the pandemic. I couldn't have a lot of the guests on the show. I couldn't really go and film inside of buildings. I couldn't travel as much. So a lot of my out-of-state videos got canceled. But other than that, everything's still going on. And like I said, we're not filming inside of a studio. So it's kind of the beauty of having an outdoor show is, the outdoors is one of the best places to be right now.
Mike, as you continue to make your content and you're on the water and you're outdoors engaging in nature, but the pandemic goes on and the summer months are, of course, well in the full swing and people are out and about. Are you noticing that the water is a little more busy this time of year than it normally would be for you filming this content? Is that does that create new challenges potentially for your show, or is that exciting for you to see as people are engaging more in nature now with the pandemic continuing on?
So both. It's great to see, and it's also not that fun. So it depends on what kind of traffic it is. On some of the smaller lakes that I film on and that I like to go to, where there's not a lot of boats, it's nice to see people out there kayaking and people out there enjoying fishing and just enjoying the water in general. The bad part about it is the double-edged sword of it is I film during the week because the weekends are the busiest times on the water, so I kind of avoid that stay out of the traffic. Right now, people are home, so the weekdays are just as busy as the weekends, and everyone's going out buying water toys because it is like the one escape you can still do. There was never really a shutdown. I mean, there was a temporary shutdown, but there's never like a full shutdown of being on the water. So people are going out buying jet skis and buying their boats, and there's been a lot more traffic and a lot newer people on the water. So the main difference is on the weekdays, it's just as busy as a weekend. But like you were saying too, it's a nice thing because I like to see people being able to get out and enjoy the thing that I love so much. But it's also frustrating because now there's so much traffic every single day, 7 days a week on the water. I mean, at noon on a Tuesday, the boat launches are full on a lot of lakes. So it's definitely changed a lot, and people are trying to find their escape, and they're trying to get outside. They're trying to find what makes them happy during this whole pandemic, which, I can't do anything but applaud that, because that's what we should all be doing is, frustration and depression and stress has been just as scary as the actual pandemic itself. So seeing people find their way out and, their little slice of heaven outside of all this chaos is kind of what I'm doing too. So, it is nice to see people doing that.
So for the new people who are taking up fishing through all of this, what tips and secrets can you provide them?
Well, I can't give them secrets because they won't be secrets anymore. I'm just joking. And it's actually a really good question too, because a lot of people are getting outside and not knowing what to do, and that's why I've been trying to push a lot more on my social media platforms about getting outside, and you can fish off the dock, off the shore. You don't need a boat even. But the biggest thing I can remind people is to be patient, and it's something that we all take for granted in the fishing world because we've been doing it for so long. Most of us have, and you just forget to be patient because you're frustrated and get irritated. But when you're first starting fishing, the number one reason why I think people don't stick with it and don't realize, the relaxation qualities it has is because they get frustrated and they think they're supposed to go out and catch fish all day. And it's not called catching, it's called fishing. So it's supposed to be therapeutic. It's supposed to be, the journey more than the destination. And, everyone can find their own peace, whether it's memories with their grandfather or with their father, memories with their sons. There's a lot of things that tie into fishing that's more than just catching fish. And that's what I would remind everybody getting into it, is that always look for more than just catching fish, because there's so much more to take away from fishing.
Mike McKinstry with us. He is from Bassquatch Hunter TV with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Mike, if people are working to get into fishing as for those therapeutic purposes, for the relaxation purposes, or just because they have had an interest in it and have never really done it, what are those steps that they should take, and what should they be prepared for early on as they're learning to be a successful fisherman?
Well, the first thing is, besides the obvious, get a fishing pole and get a fishing license and all that stuff, I always tell people this too, and it's kind of funny, but I always say go on YouTube. And that's one of the best tools that we have in this generation is if you want to learn something, you no longer have to sign up for a class at the community college or anything. You can go on YouTube and you can learn a lot. And I still go on YouTube, and I've been fishing for a living full time for years, and I still go on YouTube all the time, and I learn from other people. But if you go on YouTube, you can learn tips, you can learn techniques, you can learn how to use different kinds of gear, different kinds of line. Like any question you have pretty much about any industry nowadays is all available at your fingertips now on your phone. So if you're going to get started in fishing, it's your first time going out, you don't know what you're doing, just do a quick 20 or 30 minutes on YouTube just so you know what you're doing correctly. You're not going to harm the fish that way. Learn how to do some fish safety, how to unhook a fish correctly. The slogan of my show and my brand is take care of the people you meet, the water you touch, and the fish you catch. And I always preach that like crazy. And I want to make sure everyone realizes that when you go to a lake, you're responsible for not leaving things behind. You're responsible for taking care of the water, responsible for taking care of the fish that you catch, make sure they're safe. And you're also responsible for taking care of the people that you run into and encounter and you meet as well. So, YouTube can teach you a lot, but having good character is probably a huge thing I preach to is if you're going out fishing, it's not just you. Nature was here first, and we got to make sure we respect that. And go out there and have a good time, and just if you want to learn more about it, you can go through my YouTube channel as well. There's plenty of guys out there that have great YouTube channels for learning how to fish and catch fish. But go out there and just do trial and error. I mean, that's kind of the best way to learn anything. Go out, you get to make memories that way. You get to build your own experiences that way, and it's a lot of fun. It's so much fun. I think fishing is one of the most. It's kind of like playing a sport, but at the same time, you can do it mindlessly at sometimes. Like you can just cast and let your bait sit in the water and just reflect and just think and just talk or have a meeting or do whatever you got to do. And then if you catch a fish, great. And, you just pay attention to your bait. Or you can take it extremely seriously and be 100% focused and pay attention to your technique. And there's so much going on. So fishing's a really unique sport where you can kind of do it, very, very lazily, or you can do it very attentive. Either way.
Fishing has gone somewhat high tech, which can be surprising to some people. Do you think that's taking some of the fun out of it?
Oh, not at all. Evolution in any sport or any industry is key for growth. And a lot of the technology nowadays is very gimmicky anyway. I mean, like these electronically controlled fishing lures, like stuff like that. They're all gimmicks. I always make a joke about how that's how you catch a fisherman, not a fish. Because a lot of these things are designed just for people to look at and go, oh, it blinks, has blinking lights, I'm going to buy that. And it doesn't really change the effectiveness or really do much for actual fishing. But as far as technology and improvements in the fishing world itself, it's only going to help the sport. It helps people, if you go out for your first time catching or go out trying to catch a fish and you have a lot of the newer technology, the newer reels, some of the newer technology in the fishing line, some of the new advanced baits, you have more of a chance of catching fish. And if you have more of a chance catching fish, you have more of a chance loving what you're doing and spreading it to your friends and telling people how much fun you had. So I think the advancements are amazing. And it's just a matter of what advancements, I guess. The gimmicky ones are always going to be there in every industry. But I think that the improvements in the fishing industry have been amazing. And I mostly kayak fish too. So the improvements in the kayak world alone in the last 5 years have been game changing. I mean, the boats now you can stand up and walk around on. I've been in the ocean multiple times in my kayak and never flip over. I stand up on top of my seat in 30-mile-an-hour winds now. I mean, these kayaks are amazing. So advancements like technology and gear is just definitely key for the growth of the sport.
What's your favorite fishing spot?
In Michigan or overall?
Let's say in Michigan and overall.
Okay. That's a tough question because in Michigan, I mean, Michigan has so many lakes. I mean, the area I live in over here is there's 4 lakes in my neighborhood, and you can never be more than 5 minutes away from water in the state anyway. But my favorite lake in the state, and it's kind of like my little secret spot, but I mean, it's a public lake, and I grew up on it. But Cedar Island Lake in White Lake is my favorite lake. I catch 9 species now. I've caught in that lake for over 20 years. And I can go out there any day and any weather conditions and pretty much know where any of those species are and do pretty well with them. And it's a pretty peaceful lake. Everyone out there is very friendly. I mean, every boat that goes by waves to you. It's one of those lakes where you just feel like home. It's like the Cheers of lakes. So I really like Cedar Island Lake a lot. I think it's just a great spot to be. It's a really small public launch though, so it's hard to get in there sometimes, but it's such a good spot. Overall, I would say my favorite spot to fish that I've been, and this might surprise people because my answer used to be Texas because of all the saltwater species that I fish for in the Gulf. But it actually changed in the last year. My favorite spot I've ever fished in the entire country is actually Ohio, which surprises people every time I say that because there's so many great bodies of water all over the country. I love fishing down south, but in Ohio, there is a hidden rock quarry that I go to every year. And it's a very large rock quarry and it's public. And there's 35-foot visibility. You can see crystal clear all the way down. It's just one of the most beautiful. I call that place my therapy session because when I go there, I really have a hard time thinking of anything else besides just how beautiful it is. So there's a place in Ohio that I go to that's probably my number one spot that I kind of keep hidden, but it is public. And, it's just one of those places that I could sit out there with no fishing pole and float for hours and get the same relaxation I would if I'm fishing.
Mike, anything else for us today before we let you go?
Yeah, I just want to encourage everybody to go follow their passions. Don't be afraid to take a jump. Don't be afraid to take a risk. And, sometimes risks pay off to great rewards and sometimes they pay off to a learning lesson. But either way, you won't regret it if you try it. So don't be afraid to take that jump. And make sure you check out the Bassquatch Hunter TV show on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and on the Pursuit channel every week.
Well, Mike, we thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it as well. Mike McKinstry of Bassquatch Hunter TV with us on the Oakland County Megacast. And Ron, we've talked to him a couple other times on Civic Center TV and on the radio on Lakes FM, on The Splash, and on other programs. And it's always interesting to hear from him. And he's got such a unique story of how he got into his current gig. And the stuff that he does is so inspiring to people, both just in terms of getting out into nature and experiencing the great outdoors we have in Michigan and in the Midwest region. He mentioned some places in Ohio as well, but also to follow your dreams and do what you love in life.
He is great. This is actually the first time I've been in on one of the interviews, joining you guys late here at Lakes FM. He was awesome, though, and it's not just about his show, but it's about following your passion. And you can definitely see the passion when you watch his show. So life lessons from him, not just from the fishing world, but just life in general. Very, very interesting. I will say I'm not much of a fisherman or fisherwoman. Is that what you would call us? But I want to go fishing now. I want to get out on the water and go fishing.
Well, I'm sure that there will be plenty that do experience our interview with Mike, whether it's been live or it will be later on demand on civiccentertv.com, who will certainly be interested in going for a fishing trip in the near future. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll check in with Erica Jones out in the field as today's primary elections are well underway. Then we'll talk a little bit of sports as the NBA is back, the NHL is back, Major League Baseball is back. We'll check in with State Senator Mike Schmidt to talk about K-12 education. And then to tail off the show today, we'll talk with a local photographer and social media expert over at the Orchard Mall, who is our Facebook partner today. Ronnie and I will return after this quick break. You are watching and listening to the Oakland County Megacast on our family of TV and radio stations.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Michigan, we still need to stay careful because we don't want to go backwards, back to where we started. So keep standing 6 feet apart, keep wearing a mask in public, and if you have symptoms, talk to a healthcare provider about getting tested. To move forward, let's all do our part. So stay careful. Michigan.gov/coronavirus.
Welcome back to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Ronnie Dahl in the studios of Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM, the flagship TV and radio stations on our family of TV and community television, radio, and other media outlets here on the Megacast, including 88.1 WBFH, The Biff, Birmingham Area Municipal Access in Birmingham, Bingham Farms, Beverly Hills, and the village of Franklin, as well as online today on Facebook Live with the Orchard Mall, our Facebook partner today. We thank them for joining us, Kelly Woodley, Doug and Allie Cohen, and the entire team over at the Orchard Mall for putting our program on their Facebook page today, as we are live Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 12 noon on the Oakland County Megacast, and throughout the afternoons, evenings, weekends, and on demand with replays as well. Well, today is the August primary election day in the state of Michigan. If you are registered to vote, please go vote. If you have your absentee ballots ready to submit, we suggest, as many local clerks suggest, that you bring them directly to your local clerk's office, as as the U.S. mail is not going to be reliable in getting your votes submitted by the time that the polls close tonight at 8 p.m., which is the deadline to have those votes in. We have Erica Jones actually out in the field now, our field reporter at a local election precinct, to check in on the progress of today's primary elections. Erica.
Hi, Tyler. I'm here at Walnut Creek Middle School on Walnut Lake, actually, off Haggerty, where the precincts, they actually have 2 precincts here this morning. And I'm here with election worker Carolyn Irie, who's worked several elections in the past. So she's going to tell us a little bit about how this year has differed with the elections taking place during COVID, how the voters are complying, and different measures they've put in place to ensure a safe election this year. So, hi, Carolyn. Thank you for talking with us.
Thank you, Erica.
So how's the morning going so far?
Well, it's been slow, I would say, compared to other elections. We are under 50 voters at this point in each precinct, which is understandable because so many people have voted absentee. But we have a lot of things in place for people who want to vote in the precinct to make it safe.
So how have the voters been complying with these measures put in place? Have you had issues with people not wearing masks or social distancing?
No, not at all. Everybody has been extremely compliant. Not one single person in our precinct has wanted to not wear a mask. Everyone has been very, very good about following the rules.
Yeah, and as someone who's worked several elections in the past, obviously this year's extremely different. How does it feel? Is it weird working an election amid the pandemic?
Well, this is weird. I have to wear a mask all day, and I don't have it on, but some of our workers have chosen to also wear shields. The workers are in gloves, and we are drowning in hand sanitizer. So we also have all the voting booths are 6 feet apart.
Let's take a look at those over here.
Right, so there's nobody voting as of now, but the voting booths are 6 feet apart, and we are cleaning them in between each voter with a sanitizing solution. And as you can also see on the floor, if there were more people, we're keeping them separated by in 6 foot increments. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. And things like when people come to check in, we give them a pen, and they use that pen to fill out their application, and they also use that same pen to vote. They turn it in at the end before they put in their ballot. We sanitize them, and we start it all over again. Right. So you don't even have to pick up somebody's dirty pen.
Yeah. And what time is this voting location open until?
The election closes at 8 o'clock sharp.
And anyone, you don't need to make an appointment or anything. Anyone can just walk in to vote at any time.
No. You go to your precinct. If you're not sure where you vote, you can go online and check that out. No, you don't need an appointment. You just show up to vote. And as Tyler said, if you have your absentee ballot, you can either hop over to your local clerk's office and put it in the box before 8 o'clock. Or if you choose to vote in the precinct, we do ask that people bring their unvoted ballot with them. If you didn't receive your ballot, you can still vote in the precinct. You just have to fill out a form. We call it the township, and everything is fine. So if you put in an application for an absentee ballot and it didn't come, no big deal.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate you talking with us. And thank you so much for working a local election. Everyone really appreciates it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
All right, Tyler.
All right, thank you very much for that report, Erica. Erica Jones out in the field with us, reporting from our from a local election precinct. We'll take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk about sports. Finally, our professional sports leagues are back. We have some sort of an outlet for athletics on a national level. We'll talk about the Detroit Pistons, even though they're not in the NBA bubble. We'll talk about the NBA bubble, the future of the Detroit Pistons. Similarly, in the NHL, we'll talk about the future of the National Hockey League and how that's going to affect the Detroit Red Wings with MLive's Ansar Khan coming up after this quick break. You're watching and listening to the Oakland County Megacast on a family of TV and radio stations, including 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake and 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills.
Michigan, we're calling on you to save lives. Don't ignore it. Don't let it go to voicemail. It's urgent. In fact, it's critical. Because if you've been in close contact with someone who tests positive for COVID-19, you may have been exposed to the virus. And you could get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department. So please answer the call to learn how to protect yourself, your family, and friends. We're calling on you to stop the spread of COVID-19, to make it safe to reopen businesses and help Michigan move forward. So if you get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department, you may have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. To protect us all, answer the call. Learn more at michigan.gov/containcovid. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jonae Caldoon. I'm the Chief Medical Executive for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. The people who are at highest risk of getting severely ill from COVID-19 are the elderly and those with chronic medical conditions. That includes people with heart disease, diabetes, COPD, or those who have compromised immune systems. People who are in those categories should right now be staying at home as much as possible and not going out if it is not essential. If you fit into one of those categories, those are the things you should do. And if you have a family member who fits into one of those categories, you should be checking in on them and making sure they are following those guidelines. There's something everyone can do to protect the community from COVID-19.
Welcome back to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Ronnie Dahl. You're watching and listening to us on a family of community television, radio, and other media outlets in Oakland County, including on television, Civic Center TV, and Birmingham Area Municipal Access. Both of those TV channels on Comcast, Channel 15, and AT&T, Channel 99. In addition, we're online in high definition, civiccentertv.com, and on Facebook via Facebook Live with the Orchard Mall today. We appreciate having them on with us. In addition, we're on two great community radio stations, 88.1 WBFH The Biff, which is the service of the Bloomfield Hills School District, and 89.3 Lakes FM, live streaming online, lakesfm.com. That a service of the Greater West Bloomfield Cable Communications Commission in partnership with the West Bloomfield School District. We are pleased to be joined by a number of guests talking about COVID-19 and the impacts that it continues to have on our society in all forms, including professional sports. And we are pleased to once again be joined by MLive's Ansar Khan. He is a Detroit Red Wings and Detroit Pistons beat writer for MLive Media Group. Ansar, thank you for being with us again today.
Glad to be with you.
Glad to have you back. How have you been since we last spoke?
Good.
It's good to hear. Definitely a bit of a busier time now, I would presume, with sports being back in full motion. When we last spoke, the NBA and the NHL were still finalizing their plans for returning to live action. Now the NBA bubble is well underway. They're about halfway through the bubble play before they would have potentially play-in games for the playoffs and then the NBA playoffs. After that, the NHL is well into its 24-team playoff as well. Both interesting concepts, a little bit similar and a little bit different. Do you believe, from what you've been seeing, are these concepts working well for the sport? Has it changed maybe the dynamics of these leagues or maybe even the excitement that comes along with watching professional sports at this time of the year, this late in the seasons?
Well, yes, certainly. First of all, I think, I was a little skeptical about whether they'd be able to pull this off, both the NBA and the NHL, under these COVID circumstances. But this bubble concept, this format really seems to be working. We're seeing, they're having good success. Like you mentioned, both the NHL and NBA well underway, whereas baseball, which of course doesn't have not using the bubble format, they're having all kinds of problems. So Yeah, I mean, good for hockey and basketball. I think certainly, I think with the NHL playoffs have always been a bit unpredictable especially in the first round and a little bit in the second round. We see so many upsets. I mean, last year, who could have predicted Columbus, an 8th seed, would sweep Tampa Bay, which had one of the best all-time regular seasons ever. I mean, that's just the nature of the NHL. So that uncertainty, the suspense is always going to be there, I think, in the Stanley Cup playoffs in the early rounds. NBA's, I've always found it to be, it's much different. I mean, you just don't have those upsets in the first round. I mean, there's such a large gap of separation and talent between the top teams and everybody else. And even though they're, like you said, they're still in the I guess what you'd call regular season play, the pre-playoff games here. But I think once they do get into the first round of the playoffs, I think it'll be business as usual. I think the top teams are going to have no trouble advancing. I think right now we're seeing a separation there in the NBA of really 4 teams that are standing out. In the West, the Lakers and the Clippers. In the East, Milwaukee and Toronto. Certainly those 4 teams I would say are favored, heavy favorites to advance to the Final Four. And really, I'd be surprised if anybody, even with this new format or with this different format of bubble and really no home court advantage, no traveling, everybody's in the same place. Adds a bit of uncertainty to it, but I still think in the end it's going to be those 4 teams in the Final Four.
I would agree with that too. I think that standing out in the NBA makes you a lot tougher of competition, especially if you're in a format of having a super team like you see out west with the Lakers and the Clippers and their big threes that they have there, especially with their dynamic duels in LA with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, with the Lakers, and then of course with the Clippers, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard as well. And out east you have more of these more balanced teams but are really talented and have really prolific styles of basketball. Of course, the Milwaukee Bucks have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's just an absolute powerhouse, and if he becomes a lights-out shooter, that team is the most deadly team potentially in the NBA. And the Toronto Raptors are the defending champions. It's been interesting also to see, even beyond those 4 teams that are more than likely going to be of which the eventual champion will come from, to see these other teams that are on the cusp of being potential contenders down the line in a few years, especially teams like the New Orleans Pelicans, who have a really interesting young roster with guys like Zion Williamson, of course, who's a future superstar in the NBA. Lonzo Ball's an interesting point guard. Brandon Ingram's arguably going to be the most improved player in the NBA. And on top of that, off the basketball court, we're able to see so much more of their personalities, as well as they have been cooped up in the bubble and have been a lot more active even than before on social media. Do you think that this bubble format and what we're experiencing now, particularly in the National Basketball Association, is going to change the future of how players interact with fans, how the NBA interacts and changes the fan experience, and what ways maybe do you see that potentially creating changes?
Oh, interesting. I'm not sure. This is such an unusual time, unusual situation, that hopefully we'll never see again. Certainly, I think with the NBA, especially since David Stern became commissioner, they really do an excellent job of promoting their star players. These guys, the top players in the league are world renowned. I mean, they're marketed so heavily, and certainly that hasn't changed, and I don't expect that to change. You mentioned guys like Antetokounmpo and Zion and Williamson, certainly the next wave here. That's something that I think baseball is always, for example, has always struggled with. I mean, aside from like Mike Trout, the top players in baseball, I just don't get as much exposure, it seems, and baseball doesn't do a good enough job of promoting those guys. But I think the NBA, it will always be good in that regard, and you will see the top players promoted, and they will get that exposure. Certainly, Zion is right at the top of the list as far as the next wave.
Someone such as myself, I'm a fan, but not a big fan of sports. Not having that fan experience, not being able to go into the ballparks, do you think fans are going to turn away? How many are going to return?
Yeah, I think when it does open up back again, hopefully next year, I don't think we'll see it at first. I think, after being away for as long as they have been, the fans, I think they'll come back. They'll be eager to get back and watch the games in person. But I think, overall, I think maybe one of the fears is that, during this whole pandemic, that people have found other ways for their time, and maybe some people have figured, well, we can really do without sports, that it's not as big a deal. I think that's one of the challenges that these leagues might face going forward. But I think after the true hardcore fans, after not being able to go to games for quite some time here, I think we'll be eager to get back into what once the leagues open up again to fans, hopefully at the start of next season. Whether they can maintain that remains to be seen.
Ansar Khan with us. He is a Detroit Red Wings and Detroit Pistons beat writer for MLive Media Group with us on the Oakland County Megacast. So transitioning from teams that are currently playing ball, that are competing potentially for championships in the NHL and in the NBA in particular. In Detroit, different story. The Detroit Red Wings not in the 2014 playoff in the NHL. The Detroit Pistons not in the NBA bubble down in Orlando. Both teams very much in a rebuilding phase. Both have a lot of young talent and are looking at high draft picks coming up. Of course, the Red Wings had a high chance at the number 1 overall pick. They did not get that in the draft lottery. They'll be picking just a few selections lower, and the Pistons currently are on track to have a high lottery draft pick. Let's start with the Detroit Pistons. They bring in a new GM in Troy Weaver, an excellent evaluator of talent from the Oklahoma City Thunder organization. He's well into his job. He's filling out his staff. He's working with Dwayne Casey, and they're focusing now on the offseason. Free agents potentially they could bring in, but more importantly, adding to this young core on the Pistons squad and looking at particularly point guard, but other key positions, as there's a lot of talent in this upcoming draft. For those who are not as familiar, maybe more casual fans of Pistons basketball, who are a few guys in this upcoming draft that Pistons fans should be aware of as guys that may potentially be joining this team wherever the Pistons may select, as high as number 1 overall or even as low as number 8?
Yeah, draft lottery, I believe it's August the 20th.
Yes.
They moved it up. It'll be interesting. The Pistons have, I believe, a 10.5% chance at that top pick. And I think 40%, somewhere in the 40s of selecting the top 4. They could drop as low as 8. It's really a kind of a balanced draft at the top. There's not that one consensus top pick like there has been in so many years. You look at mock drafts and there's any number of players projected to go number 1. But like you mentioned, the Pistons, I think ideally they would like to get a point guard. That's their biggest need. Although Troy Weaver says certainly that wherever they're selecting, they're be more inclined to just go with the best player, regardless of position, who they have rated on their board. But certainly, if they could get a point guard, that would be the best case scenario. LaMelo Ball is one of the higher rated ones. Killian Hayes, a player who played in Germany. Tyrese Halliburton from Iowa State, another top point guard. Those probably are the top three, all projected to go within the top 10. A lot of people think Ball might even be the top overall pick. But if the Pistons could get one of those guys, point guard, another position of need, a center, although centers aren't quite as valuable, it seems, in today's NBA, but there's a 7'1" center who played briefly at Memphis, James Wiseman, who's expected to go likely in the top three. That's another position that the Pistons could use, but overall, I'd say if they could get one of those top 3 point guards, it would be a very good draft for them.
Yeah, there's so much parity in the NBA lottery this year in terms of wherever the ping pong balls fall and whoever has those top 4 picks, and then of course below is determined by record. Any number of combinations can create a completely different scenario for that draft lottery. It'll be really interesting to see where the cards fall and who might come down to the Detroit Pistons, or who the Pistons may go up to get if they are to rise to number 1 or into those top 4 picks in the NBA draft. Just a couple more minutes with you, Ansar Khan from MLive Media Group. Let's talk about the Detroit Red Wings. Similar situation, young team, developing team, relatively new GM and Steve Eisman with the team leading their rebuild. They're a little bit similar to the Detroit Pistons, and they're still in the early rebuild phase, but they have a lot of young talent coming up in their minor league system. They're going to have another high draft pick. For Red Wings fans who are clamoring to have the Red Wings back into the NHL playoffs, contending for a championship, how far away do you believe that this team is from being in playoff contention, from being at least in playoff contention?
A playoff contention, I would say at least a couple of years. I don't see them, certainly not next season. I mean, this team was really historically bad this season. The 3rd worst points percentage in franchise history. They finished, I believe, 23 points below the next worst team. Which certainly when one team is that bad compared to the rest, it really points out the inequities of the draft lottery, and that they only had an 18.5% chance of winning it, and that they drop all the way to 4th. Certainly it doesn't seem like an equitable system, but they're at least a couple years away from even competing for a playoff spot, as I see it. If they would have gotten that number 1 pick, and Alexis Lafreniere is certain to be that top selection by all accounts. Could have been a bit of a game changer, but where they're selecting at number 4, whoever they choose is not going to, highly unlikely that he'll be able to help immediately. They'll need more than likely 1 or 2 years of development time before joining the NHL. So it's still going to be a while yet before we see the Red Wings in the playoffs.
Well, Ansar, thank you very much for being with us today.
Glad to be with you.
Appreciate it. Ansar Khan from MLive Media Group, a Detroit Red Wings and Pistons beat writer for them, as sports are back in Detroit and all throughout the country. Of course, NBA and NHL, you're not going to be seeing our local Detroit teams anytime soon, as they are out of contention for the playoffs and the championships. The Detroit Tigers are playing baseball, although under some different circumstances. Their games this week have experienced some postponements and cancellations due to COVID-19 and to weather. That season's still very much underway. The Tigers having a great season, so Detroit sports is looking up a little bit in the immediate. We can have some reasons for optimism, but still a lot of cause for patience, as a lot of our teams are continuing to rebuild. here in Detroit, and maybe a couple years before we start seeing some quality Detroit sports once again. We'll take a break and we'll come back. We'll shift back more toward more serious COVID-19 related issues. We'll talk with the chairperson of the K-12 Appropriations Subcommittee in the in Michigan's Congress is State Senator Wayne Schmidt from Michigan's 37th District. Coming up next, you're watching and listening to the Oakland County Megacast on our family of TV and radio stations. Ronnie and I will return after this break.
This may seem uncomfortable, but so is being hooked to an IV, sleeping in a hospital bed, and fighting for your life. When it comes to COVID-19, comfort is not as important as saving lives. Wearing a mask can greatly reduce the chance of spreading the virus. So mask up, Michigan, every time you leave home.
Hi, my name is Kurt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Park's COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
Welcome back to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Ronnie Dahl in studios at Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM, our flagship TV and radio stations. In addition, as always, we're on 88.1 WBFH, The Biff, and Birmingham Area Municipal Access. Today, we're on the Facebook page of the Orchard Mall, West Bloomfield's very own enclosed mall. We appreciate them for joining us today on the Oakland County Megacast as we continue to talk about all the latest COVID-19 related issues and other top news stories in the Oakland County area. And as we're approaching the fall semester beginning for schools, there's still a lot of looming issues, whether or not we should bring kids back into in-person learning is a hot debate all throughout the United States, certainly here in the state of Michigan and in Oakland County, as well as the continuing budget crisis in the state of Michigan as state leadership is continuing to work on formulating the budget for the next fiscal year, and that still leaves some schools wondering how much of a financial hit is coming their way, not for this current school year necessarily, as that's been taken care of, but for the next school year and beyond. And we are pleased to be joined to get more information on that and other topics from the chairperson of the K-12 Appropriations Subcommittee in the Michigan Senate. He is Senator Wayne Schmidt from Michigan's 37th District with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Senator Schmidt, thank you for being with us again.
Good to be with you, Tyler and Ronnie. Always a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, appreciate having you back. How have you been since we last spoke, and how's your team doing?
Good. Everyone, family's doing well up here, and staff down in Lansing's doing well. So another beautiful day here in northern Michigan, downtown Traverse City. Just went out and voted, made sure I got my sticker.
Very nice.
Remind everyone, polls are open till 8 o'clock. I had my mask with me. I had a really kind of cool one. Friends of mine up in Elk Rapids Senate has northern Michigan and the peninsula and all of that. I'm sure a lot of your viewers and listeners head up this way for their vacation or their cottage. So we're always glad to have them.
So I'm actually headed up that way this weekend. It is such a beautiful part of our state. What are your thoughts on the new restrictions or the old restrictions put back in place for your area?
It didn't really affect northern Michigan and the Upper Peninsula all that much. Part of my frustration, and I wear a mask. I promote it on Facebook. I believe in all the science and all of those kind of things. A little frustrated with the execution of the governor's executive orders. I'm not playing partisan politics here. I honestly don't remember if we're at 150, 160, however many. Digging a little deeper, I understand the intent better. I had to call some people in the administration, find out It's really to deal with that Harper's situation in East Lansing. Not so much that the bar itself didn't do a good job of sanitizing. I know all of our restaurants and bars and lodging properties are doing their absolute best, but it was those younger people congregating. We saw that at McCarty's Cove up in Marquette, Torch Fest on the Torch Lake Sandbar there. I know there were other places that had similar parties. That was the intent. So it came across, shutting down all these bars. Well, you have a place like maybe the Beacon Lounge, top of the park there, Park Place Hotel, downtown Traverse City, piano bar. I don't know if you've been up there. It's a good spot for a nightcap. Well, they probably do somewhere between 60 and 80%, of liquor sales. Appetizers, but not a lot of food. That's not the hot spot that Harper's was, but it might have fallen into that, or that corner bar in the UP where, after a shift, you might stop by, have a shot and a beer, and then you move on and someone else comes in. So, no offense to downstaters, but it was downstaters writing protocols and stuff for up north and not taking into account how we do business up here. So we accommodated and did our best. And like I said, I always encourage people to wear their masks, socially distance, wash your hands and your face, be respectful. Don't be the jerk that comes in and says it's my right not to wear a mask. Well, it's the property owners, that store, shopkeeper, the restaurant, whatever, their right to protect their staff, their family. Put the mask on. That's what it comes down to.
Senator Schmidt, you are also the chairperson of the K-12 Appropriations Subcommittee. The state very hard at work formulating its budget for the 2020-2021 fiscal year. There's another revenue estimating conference coming up this month in order to make sure that the state's leadership is staying on top of the financials as they continue to be impacted by COVID-19. And in particular, our schools are really interested in seeing where this goes, as the estimates on per pupil funding cuts and overall cuts to education in the state of Michigan have been a hot button issue and something they've been focused on for a very long time. Any updates on the progress in terms of the budget negotiations in the state of Michigan and where those cuts to education may be coming?
Well, it's a challenge right now. We just passed the supplemental that actually did increase funding per student about $175 per student. We took the CARES Act, the COVID monies from the federal government. We used those monies because as schools have to adapt and find new ways of distance or online learning and ways to deal with, meal service, for those students, they had to find and adapt and be, quite frankly, reinvent themselves. So we were able to use a lot of those federal dollars, not have any cuts for the fiscal 2019-2020 budget, and actually increase funding about $175 per student. Did the $500 per teacher because they had additional expenses and challenges. So we got through that and did it in a bipartisan fashion. We can still work together here in the state. That's why I remain the eternal optimist. Now for the 2020-2021 budget that's due October 1st, I still remain optimistic, but a lot more challenged. As we go into this, we're talking about pupil counts and how much they get per student. We're dealing with school districts. Are they going to have 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% of their students doing distance or online learning versus in classroom? Are we even going to be able to have classroom learning? There's a lot of debate out there right now. I am relying upon the doctors and the epidemiologists and those folks to help guide me as to what we should do. I think that I want to encourage, and this is a parent of two high school boys. One's a sophomore, one's going to be a senior. They miss their friends. They miss the interaction. We know that that's a better learning environment from the standpoint if you've got a great teacher, for example, but that student's not getting it and their next door, their seatmate, says, hey, this is how it is. Oh, yeah, thanks, Johnny, or thanks, Janie, for helping me figure that out. That kind of interaction is critical. But then again, we certainly don't want to put teachers or students at risk, or when they go home, any parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, relatives. So it's going to be a tough act. The other part is, as you mentioned, Tyler, the August Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference, commonly referred to as the CREC, will come up in mid to late August. We'll see what the feds are doing. You know, we could be somewhere between 5 and 10%. You know, the estimates are varying how we're going to have a shortfall in the school aid budget. You know, at the beginning of spring, when this was all hitting, you know, I was unfortunately Mr. Doom and Gloom, but I was just trying to be very realistic, because we saw sales tax revenues drop off, income tax revenues. I chair the appropriations budget for transportation. We saw gas tax revenues drop off, the actual fuel taxes. We're behind in registration fees coming in. You know, it was a brave new world, and so we're going to hunker down. Right now we're dealing with the House package, the 4 bills, to see how that looks to put kids back in the classroom, or distance learning, or any combination of that. So talking with superintendents, I was just speaking with Superintendent Vitti of the Detroit Public Schools. Just yesterday, I talked to Superintendent John Van Wagner of Traverse City Area Public Schools. Both TCAPs, of course, biggest school district in my Senate seat. The Detroit Public Schools, largest school district in the state, have to weigh all those different considerations.
So the student count day is always so important to the individual school districts, and they do anything and everything to try to make sure kids are in the classroom on that day. How will that change going forward? Could that go away, and are you going to count them remotely? What's that looking like?
That's a good question, Ronnie. We are trying to figure that out. We know that this year it is not going to be the same way, that have to hit that 75% number to get additional monies or meet all the state requirements. I think the challenge is going to be, and many school districts, teachers, administrators, support staff are rising to the occasion on distance learning, online learning, whatever you want to call it. The challenge is going to be the frequency. Does it count? Do you count that student? If you check in with them twice a week, once a week? And these are the things that we're debating back and forth. I don't think that it can be a hard and fast 75% in a seat and we'll count it, meaning in the actual classroom. So we're going to have to figure out some kind of hybrid. And that's what myself and Senator Lana Tice, who chairs education policy in the Senate, working with our staffs and the Senate policy staff on how that's going to look. And each school district is different. We have districts up here where you don't have quite the same numbers, thankfully, of COVID cases that you do have downstate, although we've seen some outbursts, outbreaks, but mostly contained. So we're trying to see what's going to work for each school district, and we don't have a firm answer on that yet. That's the House sent over that package, and we're looking it over now and going through those machinations.
Senator Wayne Schmidt with us. He is from Michigan's 37th Senatorial District. He's also the chairperson of the Michigan K-12 Appropriations Subcommittee. Lastly today, just a few more minutes with you, Senator. You had previously, a few years back, proposed a bill that would ban our high schools in the state of Michigan from using names such as the former name of the current Washington football team. That bill did not go through then. Of course, now we are seeing that be a hot button issue in the state of Michigan, throughout the country nationally, as high schools and other schools are changing their mascot names. Any other work that you are doing now, or that others in our state government are doing to address that issue, as many schools are changing those racially offensive nicknames? Any other work that's still in process in making that law in some sense in the state of Michigan?
Tyler, we continue to work on that. I do have a draft of that bill that I can introduce again. I've been working with many of the tribes, the sovereign nations here in the state of Michigan. Chairman Jamie Stuck he also heads up that committee now task force for the governor. I forget the name of it, that works on persons of color and how COVID has impacted that. And so Chairman Stuck has become a good friend working on that issue. And what we've tried to highlight is changing that. We've seen schools, you have Central Michigan University, for example, the Chippewas, work closely with the Saginaw Sag-Chip tribe there to honor and respect that. We've seen changes from the Redmen, the Redskins, all of those schools are starting to do it on their own. There's the fund that they've established, and that's what Chairman Stuck has been highlighting, and I've been trying to get the word out too, that there are monies to transition mascots, logos, band uniforms, sports uniforms, signage, all of that to take the burden off the schools that want to make those changes. And we've seen the benefits of that. I was very proud to introduce that bill, and even though it didn't pass, it did generate discussion, it generated movement to the changes, or making sure that those schools that honor Native Americans are doing so in a proper way, that they're not using the regalia or any of the symbols in an inappropriate manner, and stress the history of the first people here, obviously in Michigan and in the North America. So I'm very pleased to continue to work with all my the tribes that here. I understand that they're a federal, they're a sovereign, so they're dealing federal government to tribe, but they also realize we're all people, and the rubber meets the road here at the state and at the school district level. So good working relationships with all my tribes. I think I have the most sovereign nations of any senator in Michigan.
Well, Senator Schmidt, we appreciate your time today, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Ronnie. Always good to be on Lakes FM.
We appreciate having you on. Senator Wayne Schmidt from Michigan's 37th District with us on the Oakland County Megacast on our family of TV and radio stations. Good to talk to him about a number of topics, get an update on the K-12 budget discussions as well as other issues in the state of Michigan. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with more. You're watching and listening to the Oakland County Megacast on our family of TV and radio stations.
As rivals, we don't always see eye to eye.
Like who scored the best recruits?
Who's gonna be who?
And whether we wear green
or blue.
But one thing we can all agree on to help stop the spread of COVID-19. Wear a mask.
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 The ball's in your court, Michigan.
Michigan, we still need to stay careful because we don't want to go backwards. Back to where we started. So keep standing 6 feet apart. Keep wearing a mask in public. And if you have symptoms, talk to a healthcare provider about getting tested. To move forward, let's all do our part. So stay careful. Michigan.gov/coronavirus.
Welcome back to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Kieft alongside Ronnie Dahl in the studios of Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. In addition today, the Megacast, as always, 88.1 WBFH, The Biff, and on Birmingham area municipal access, providing coverage in Birmingham, Bingham Farms, Beverly Hills, and the village of Franklin. Today, we are also on Facebook via Facebook Live, as we are each and every day in high definition on the Facebook page of the Orchard Mall. And we thank the Orchard Mall, of course, for joining us today, as we are pleased to be joined now by our last guests today, who are from the Orchard Mall at Frameable Faces Photography and M10 Social, which is within the walls of the Orchard Mall. We appreciate having Allie and Doug Cohen on with us now on the Oakland County Megacast. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate having you guys on. How have you guys been? How's your business been doing over the course of the pandemic?
It's been pretty good. You know, I got to say, when we went into lockdown, you know, when everybody was under the stay-at-home order, we were, you know, we moved everything home from the studio. We brought our computers home, and for the clients who we'd already photographed, we were able to continue to meet with them via Zoom and still do some business. But at the same time, you know, we weren't able to take any more pictures for a few months there. So it did put a halt to our business. But thankfully, we were able to get a little bit of assistance from the government with the CARES Act, I suppose it fell under, to help keep us whole a little bit. And as soon as we reopened, there was a lot of pent up demand. So a lot of the people that would have been photographing with us during that time still came. So we've been busy since we reopened, and so thank goodness we were not impacted that negatively.
So I would imagine a lot of those customers are probably now the seniors, because this is a popular time for your senior pictures. Are you still doing the photographs inside, or are you trying to do them outside more?
So we try to normalize everything and give our seniors the same experience that we've always been able to give them. Most of our senior sessions, I say, are like a 70-30 hybrid of on location and in studio. So if we are doing a session in the studio, as an example, if we need to do the yearbook headshot for one of the local schools, we'll do it. Everybody that's in the studio will be masked up. The senior will be in front of the backdrop, way more than 6 feet away from anybody. And the senior will not be masked, because you can't have that in the yearbook photo. But, we're practicing the social distancing as we need to. And so, yes, we are photographing in the studio, but we're doing it in, I believe, the absolute safest way possible.
Yep.
Are you having any students who want some pictures with a mask on just to kind of remember this crazy time?
Absolutely. We just had someone in this past weekend to do a shot over at West Bloomfield High School, and she's making an album for her son, and the very last photo in the album is of her son masked up. I mean, these are unprecedented times, right. And this is something that these kids are going to always have and always remember. I mean, these kids are making history right now.
And that was a class of 2020 graduating senior, so there's been a little more overlap than normal, because some of the graduating class of 2020 seniors who might have waited to do their pictures in the spring weren't able to do that for a little while. So we're still photographing some class of 2020 seniors, even though we're already into the class of 2021 season. So there's a little bit of overlap, and we're photographing kids from both graduating classes right now.
Allie and Doug Cohen with us on the Oakland County Megacast. They are the owners of Frameable Faces Photography and M10 Social. So we're familiar in the West Bloomfield area and on our stations here with Frameable Faces Photography. We've interviewed you before on Splash, and we've, of course, had you on the Megacast as well. But M10 Social, that sounds like it's relatively new. Can you explain to us what M10 Social is and what you guys do with that?
Absolutely. So the way M10 Social kind of grew and happened was when we started this studio and opened up in the Orchard Mall 12 years ago. At that time, I had been coming off of a career in corporate sales, which I didn't really enjoy very much. Allie's the photographer here. So in 2008, when the recession hit and all of my accounts went bankrupt.
Because they were all automotive.
Because they were all automotive, pretty much. The company I was working for, ultimately, they fired my boss first. And I knew I was going to be next. So that's when Allie said, when it happens, don't go look for something else. Let's build this together. And my experience had been in sales and, marketing and management and sales in the corporate world. But I'd called on and worked with businesses from the Fortune 20 all the way down to small mom and pop shops. So I took all of that experience and applied it to the studio. And that's been a big part of my role here from day one. Allie and I interact with our clients, and I help her on photo sessions with lighting. But when it comes to branding our studio and marketing it, it's all been social media. So I dove right in with digital marketing and social media right at pretty much the advent of social media. It really coincided with the opening of our studio. So little by little, I started building our community online, and people would start to notice and start to ask me if I could help them. And one by one, I started to take on some clients, and I decided, it's time to brand what I'm doing as a separate digital marketing entity, and that's where M10 Social was born. So I have a separate website, I have clients, and I'm digitally marketing for not just Frameable Faces, but for a few other companies in the area. So it's It's a lot of fun. It allows me to be creative, help other businesses grow. And what's interesting is that this year, I'm busier than ever because so many businesses were caught unprepared for a pivot to online business when this pandemic hit, and a lot of them are realizing that they need to up their game online. So it's been a great opportunity for me to help businesses reach out and connect with and continue to stay in business with their community and their clients.
Social media is so vital during this pandemic for businesses, but if you had someone prior to this with no social media experience, what do you tell them about how to use it and which platforms are the best?
Well, in terms of how to use it, I always recommend that somebody get used to using it as a consumer of social media before they even think about well, not necessarily before, but at least in concert with doing it as a creator and as a brand that's posting out a marketing message online. Because if you don't kind of understand as an end user how people interact on social media and how to experience it as an end user, it's going to be tougher for you to understand maybe what the value is and how it works as a brand. And then as you start to learn that and you bring in somebody like me who has the expertise to help you craft a message and start to build a community online, you need to do it where your demographics make sense. So, if you're looking to, if the demographics of your customer base are teenagers, you're not going to make Facebook your prime and only platform because that's where the parents are, not where the kids are. The kids are over on Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok, so you need to kind of be where your customers are. I would say not necessarily put all your eggs in one basket. Use a couple of platforms depending on, who's where. And also treat your social media game as a means for driving some traffic to your owned online assets, your website, your blog, maybe an email newsletter, the things that you own.
Allie and Doug Cohen with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Just a few more minutes with the two of you. So before we let you go, as you bring in more clients for the photography side over the summer, and as those clients prepare to come in for their photography sessions on site at the Orchard Mall or out in the field, what should they be prepared for now that maybe they weren't needing to be prepared for previously before the pandemic as they get ready to go to these appointments?
I think that what most people are doing and will continue to do is masks to come into the mall for sure. Outside, it's a little bit easier because it's rare that when we're photographing a high school senior, as an example, that there's more than 10 people. And I photograph very far away. And even when you're lighting, you're not super close and you're masked.
Yeah, we don't need to be right on top of somebody to photograph them outside. So it's pretty safe outdoors.
Yeah.
Indoors, they may have to take some, they may have to consider who's involved. If they have elderly folks, if they're doing a multi-generational shoot, they may want to decide if being indoors is even the best move. Like maybe we should, while the weather's nice, we should consider doing it outdoors. But other than that, it's like Allie said at the beginning, the way we approach it has not been that drastically impacted. I mean, unless you were going to try to do a big group inside,
family photo, right?
That could be a problem. But otherwise, we're able to still do pretty much everything we were able to do before. And actually, I just want to throw in that we're able to do more than we were able to do before, because another thing we've done is Art and Frame has opened up their second location here inside of our studio. So that's another option that we offer. Brad Gordon has a store, a framing shop at Maple and Cranbrook, and he has now moved into our studio. So we have framing in-house as well with Art and Frame. So we've been really busy trying to up our game and do some planning and really be ready to roll when things reopened, and it's worked out pretty well so far.
Mm-hmm.
Doug, Allie, we thank you for being with us. Before we let you go, anything else that you'd like our audience to know or any other points you'd like to touch on today?
Just visit frameablefaces.com. I'm going to do a shameless plug or two, but we also have a podcast now, the Doug and Allie Morning Show podcast.
It's very fun.
Which is a lot of fun, and there's a local flavor to it, and it's we have special guests every now and then, and it's You can get it on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, anywhere you want, pretty much. Doug and Allie Morning Show podcast. So we're all over the place. Obviously, as I said before, with M10 Social and my approach, we're very much digital marketing and social media savvy. So you can connect with frameable faces pretty much anywhere you want online, and come see us at the mall.
Well, Doug, Allie, yes, absolutely. Allie, Doug, we thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Allie and Doug Cohen with us from Frameable Faces and M10 Social on the Oakland County Megacast. Such an interesting pivot that they made even before the pandemic and the origins of their business, and then to continue those pivots as time goes on. And of course, as the pandemic begins, they make their move to more social media and marketing as well, which is so critical. And it's just another great example of our local businesses modifying their approach to running their business to be tailored to the pandemic and continued success moving forward.
I will say, since they're doing a morning podcast, maybe they should give tips to couples on how to work together, because it's been a stressful time for a lot of couples during this time because they're spending so much time together. Obviously, they have been doing that for quite some time, working together. So you work together, you live together, there's no escape. So they should weave that into their morning podcast as well.
Yeah, they definitely have the personalities for podcasting and for marketing, and we appreciate having them on. They're always a fun interview, and so and we also thank Doug and Allie for their work helping us get onto the Orchard Mall's Facebook page today on this edition of the Oakland County Megacast. Well, before we go, it is still, of course, primary election day here in the state of Michigan. We previously had Erica Jones out at one polling location in the local area. We now have her at another polling location, checking in about an hour later. Erica, how are things going at the location you're at? Where are you at, and what's going on?
Hey, I'm at the Keego Harbor City Hall, much different from where we were before. Before I was at Walnut Creek Middle School. It was a larger location. They actually had 2 precincts going on there. Keego Harbor City Hall is very, very small. I was able to walk inside. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to speak with anyone because they have very few employees, and each of those employees was interacting with a voter at the time. Not really a line. There was only 2 or 3 people waiting, and it was moving very smoothly. But again, they're making sure to be social distancing. They even had a husband and wife that they wanted to social distance in there. And it's very different. I was talking with Ronnie earlier, and she was telling me how normally on election day at Keego Harbor City Hall, all the candidates are outside, and there's no one outside here today. So definitely different from past years with COVID this year from what we've seen before.
Well, Erica, thank you very much for that report. Erica Jones out at Keego Harbor City Hall at another one of our local precincts, as today is the day. It's primary election day. If you are registered to vote and you need information on your precinct, you can find that online. A lot of your local clerk's offices will have links to information on local precinct maps, or they'll have information if you've forgotten where your precinct is on how to get there, or if there are changes in place as well. They'll have that information also for you on their website or by calling your local clerk by phone. A lot of our local clerks, especially for you absentee voters, we have a large influx of absentee voters. They are encouraging you to take your absentee ballots, if you're submitting them today, directly to your local clerk's office, as the U.S. mail will likely not get them to the clerk's offices in time for the 8 p.m. deadline tonight when polls close. That is the cutoff for absentee ballot submissions to your local clerk. 8 p.m. sharp is when the polls close, and that is the deadline as well. So we urge you, alongside our friends in the local clerk's offices all throughout our coverage area, to take your absentee ballots in to the clerk's offices themselves, or put them in the drop boxes. And if you're going to the polls, give yourself some extra time. It's going to take a little more time maybe today in some cases. You're going to have to take some extra precautions. And we will, of course, join you again tomorrow on the Oakland County Megacast for more news around the local area. For election results tonight, go to civiccentertv.com. Right on our homepage, there will be a graphic right there. You'll click on that graphic, and it will take you directly to election results. We have those for you. We'll have those for you on our website, civiccentertv.com. As I go to our website here, just a moment while the web page loads. If I can show it to you, I'll show it to you. Our front page will have a graphic right there that will say, click here for election results. You will be able to see the election results as they come in tonight, civiccentertv.com. That is going to do it for our program today. We thank all of our guests for joining, including Jason Wasserman, Dr. Jason Wasserman from Oakland University's William Beaumont School of Medicine. We thank Mike McKinstry as well from Bassquatch Hunter TV for joining us. Ansar Khan from MLive Media Group, as well as Senator Wayne Schmidt from Michigan's 37th District, and of course Doug and Allie Cohen from Frameable Faces Photography and M10 Social for being with us on today's edition of the Oakland County Megacast. Once again, you can go to our website, civiccentertv.com, for your local August primary election results, and you can join us tomorrow on civiccentertv.com live, as well as our TV and radio stations, including 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 WBFH The Biff, Birmingham Area Municipal Access, and of course Civic Center TV, as we bring you the latest news and information from around the Oakland County area regarding COVID-19 and other important top stories each and every day. A big thank you to our crew, booking producer Jake Kustash, getting everybody ready to go on the program each and every day. Larry Nyland, our Zoom producer, as well as and our team in studio here at Lakes FM. Erica Jones, our field reporter, for great reports out in the field each and every day. And of course, you, the viewer, listening to us in Birmingham, Bingham Farms, Beverly Hills, Franklin, West Bloomfield, Keego Harbor, Sylvan Lake, Orchard Lake, or wherever you are, all throughout southeastern Michigan, Oakland County, the state of Michigan, the U.S., and the world. We thank you for joining us. The Oakland County Megacast will return tomorrow at 10 a.m. for its next live episode, and we thank you for being with us today.